did not think the hallway was important at first. It was just the maintenance corridor behind the offices on level 3. No windows, no decoration, beige walls that had never been painted anything else, blue carpet glued directly to concrete, fluorescent light humming overhead with the kind of tired vibration that feels like it has been there longer than the building itself. No one used it except night staff. That was why I liked it. I worked security, midnight to 6. Most of my shift involved watching cameras and pretending the world still needed someone to make sure nothing moved. The building was mostly empty after 11. Accountants and managers went home. Cleaners came in waves. Then even they left. Between 2 and 4 in the morning, the place felt suspended. That hallway sat just outside the old server room. The server room had been decommissioned years ago, but the corridor remained because no one wanted to deal with the permits required to tear out structural walls. So it stayed there, 30 feet long, 4 doors that no longer opened to anything useful. One emergency exit at the end that had been sealed shut after a renovation. Every building has a space like that. A leftover artery. The first time I saw it on camera, I thought it was a trick of perspective. Camera 3B covered the full length of the corridor from ceiling height. Slight fisheye distortion. When the light flickered, shadows stretched longer than they should have. At 2:17 on a Tuesday morning, I noticed something tall at the far end. Not standing, just there. The shape was almost flush against the ceiling. I leaned forward in my chair. It was not touching the ground the way a person would. The limbs bent wrong, too sharply at the knees. The arms seemed to extend down nearly to the floor, even though the torso was positioned higher than normal human proportions allowed. I assumed one of the maintenance carts had been left in a strange angle. Something leaning. I switched to a different camera to verify. Camera 3C faced the sealed exit door from the opposite direction. The hallway was empty. I switched back. The shape was still there, except now it was slightly closer. That was when I understood it was not an object. It had a hat, a wide brim, tilted low over where a face should be. That detail did something to my stomach I could not explain. Objects do not wear hats. I told myself it was a shadow from a hanging pipe or cable, a trick of the lens. I zoomed in. The pixels blurred, but the proportions remained wrong. The torso was narrow, the shoulders too sharp, the arms bent in multiple places instead of at simple joints, the legs folded upward in a way that suggested they were too long for the hallway. And the head. The head was angled slightly downward, as if looking at the floor in front of it. At that moment, the fluorescent light above it flickered. For one frame. In that frame, it moved. Not stepped. Not shifted. It was simply nearer. I sat very still, listening to the hum of the monitors. There are rules in security work that no one writes down. One of them is this: if something appears on camera that should not exist, you check the physical location immediately. Because if you wait too long, your brain starts explaining it for you. I took the master key from the drawer and walked down the main corridor toward level 3. The building was quiet in that way that amplifies your own breathing. Motion sensors activated lights ahead of me in soft clicks. When I turned into the maintenance corridor, I expected the shape to be gone. The hallway was empty. Same beige walls, same blue carpet, same low ceiling. No hat, no limbs, no shadow that made sense. I walked to the end slowly, touched the sealed exit door. It was still locked, as it had been for years. Dust along the baseboard remained undisturbed. I looked up at the fluorescent fixture. It hummed. Nothing more. I laughed quietly at myself. Camera glitch. That was all. I returned to the security office and rewound the footage. The shape had not appeared gradually. It simply existed in the frame starting at 2:14, standing at the far end. Then every time the light flickered, it moved closer. By 2:18, it stood halfway down the corridor. By 2:19, it was almost beneath the camera. At 2:20, the light flickered again. The frame showed nothing. Then the feed cut to static for 3 seconds. When it returned, the hallway was empty. I replayed the footage until dawn. Each time I noticed something new. The creature did not walk. It folded. Each movement seemed like joints collapsing inward and reforming further ahead. Like something too large trying to exist in a space too small and compressing itself between frames. And its hands. The fingers were long, not simply elongated, but separated too far apart, like the bones had been rearranged without regard for human structure. They almost touched the floor. I did not report it, because I did not have language for it, and because reporting strange shapes on cameras gets you evaluated. The next night I watched camera 3B at exactly 2:14. Nothing happened. 02:15. Nothing. 02:16. The fluorescent light flickered. My throat tightened. At 2:17, the shape appeared again. This time closer to the middle from the start, as if it had not reset to the end of the hallway, as if it remembered. I did not go down immediately. I stayed in my chair and watched. At 2:18, it bent its head. Not much, just enough to suggest awareness. The hat brim lifted slightly, but the face remained in shadow. At 2:19, the light flickered. When it returned, the creature stood directly beneath the camera. The angle distorted it, making the limbs appear even longer. The shoulders pressed almost into the ceiling tile. The head tilted upward slowly toward the lens. I saw no eyes, only two darker spaces where something could have been, and then something that made my skin feel hollow. The mouth. It was not wide. It was not open. It was unfinished. Like the skin had been shaped around a smile but never completed. The feed did not cut this time. Instead, the creature reached up, its hand extended toward the camera. The fingers did not grip the ceiling. They passed through it, not physically. Visually, the feed distorted as if the lens itself were being touched from inside. I stood up without realizing I had done so. The hallway outside the security office was silent. And then I heard it, not from the speakers, from somewhere in the building. A soft, dragging sound. Slow, measured, like something adjusting limbs that did not quite fit the space. I did not check the camera again. I walked. I do not know why. I told myself I needed to verify, but a deeper part of me wanted to see it without the distortion of pixels. The maintenance corridor felt colder than the rest of the building. The fluorescent light buzzed slightly louder. Halfway down the hallway, I noticed something new. Footprints. Not in dust. In the carpet. Impressions. Long and narrow. Each toe distinct. Too many toes. They pressed into the blue fibers in a straight line from the far door toward the center, stopping exactly where the camera hung above. I did not hear it at first, because it did not breathe. It did not growl. It did not make any noise at all. I felt it. A shift in the air behind me. The kind of presence that exists before your brain decides what to call it. I turned slowly. It filled the hallway. Folded into it. Its back pressed against one wall. Knees bent unnaturally upward. One arm braced against the opposite wall like it needed support to remain upright. The hat nearly touched the ceiling. The head angled downward toward me. Up close, the proportions were worse. The torso was narrow, almost hollow-looking. The limbs seemed attached not by muscle but by intent, and the face. There were eyes now, small, deep, set too far apart, and the mouth. It was wider than on camera, not smiling, just shaped to resemble one. It did not attack. It did not lunge. It studied. The head tilted slowly, mirroring my posture. When I shifted my weight, it shifted too. Perfectly. Not a second late. Exactly in time, as if the hallway were a mirror and I were the reflection. I understood then what it was doing. It was learning. My stance, my breathing, my shape. The dragging sound came again, softer this time, not from the creature, from behind me. I realized something that made the floor feel unstable. There were two, one ahead, one behind. The hallway was not a corridor anymore. It was a space between them, and I was the center point. The one behind me moved closer. I did not need to turn to know. I felt the air compress slightly at my back. The one in front adjusted its limbs again, folding tighter, making room, as if expecting something to pass through. That was when the light flickered. For less than a second, in that darkness, I felt something touch my shoulder. Not claws, not fingers, pressure, gentle, testing. The light returned. The creature in front now stood exactly where I had been. Same posture, same tilt of the head. The hat angled slightly downward, and the one behind me was gone. I was at the end of the hallway, facing the camera. My arms hung at my sides in a position I did not remember choosing. The fluorescent light hummed. The carpet felt soft beneath feet that suddenly felt unfamiliar. Somewhere faintly, I heard a chair scrape against tile in the security office, and I understood with a clarity that removed panic entirely. The creature had not come to kill, it had come to replace. The hallway was not its home. It was its rehearsal space, a narrow place to practice fitting inside a shape that walked upright, a shape that wore hats sometimes, a shape that carried keys. The dragging sound returned, but farther away now, moving through another corridor, adjusting to another body, learning the weight, learning the stride. On the camera feed later, at 2:21, the hallway appeared empty, except for one figure standing beneath the lens, perfectly proportioned, normal height, hat brim low, face calm, looking directly up and smiling in a way that was finally complete. I did not run. That is the first thing you should understand about what happened next. If you are imagining this like a normal horror story, with screaming and sprinting and desperate slamming of doors, you are already too far from the truth. When it took my place, it took something else too. Urgency. Panic is a kind of selfhood. It is the body insisting that it belongs to itself. The moment I stood at the end of that hallway, facing the camera I had watched for years, I felt my panic drain away as if someone had opened a valve in my chest. My thoughts became smooth, quiet, almost reasonable. I walked back toward the security office. The building looked the same. The motion sensor lights clicked on as I approached, just as they always had. The air smelled like cleaning solvent and stale carpet. Everything was normal enough to be believed. But normality is not proof. It is only habit. I pushed open the door to the security office and stopped in the doorway. Someone was sitting in my chair. It wore my uniform. Same badge clipped to the chest. Same crease in the trousers. Same cheap pen tucked into the sleeve pocket. From behind, it looked like a tired man leaning forward toward a bank of monitors. My monitors. On the screens, camera 3B showed the maintenance corridor. Empty. No hat. No limbs. No folded shadow. The figure in my chair turned its head slightly, like it had heard me. And I saw my face. Not wrong enough to trigger immediate terror. Not monstrous. Not obviously inhuman. It was my face rendered with the confidence of someone who had studied it under perfect lighting. The expression was relaxed, familiar. The eyes were focused in the way mine get when I'm concentrating on details. Even the small scar near my brow was present. The mouth, though, the mouth was too still. People think the mouth is what smiles, but the mouth is also what fails to smile. It trembles, it changes, it carries micro decisions. Mine always moved slightly, even at rest. This mouth did not. It held the idea of a neutral expression like a sign printed on paper. It stood up smoothly, no hesitation, no awkwardness of joints. The thing had practiced. It spoke in my voice, and the sound was perfect enough that my body reacted as if it had come from my own mouth. You are back early. The sentence was wrong. I had no reason to be back early, but it was the sort of sentence someone would say if they wanted to anchor reality in routine. I did not answer. I watched it closely. It blinked once. Then it smiled. Not wide, not predatory. Just the polite smile you give someone you do not want to alarm. The smile stayed a fraction too long. I said the first thing that came into my head, because thinking felt slippery, and the building felt as if it were pressing me gently toward accepting whatever was easiest. Who are you? The thing tilted its head, and the motion made my stomach tighten because it was the same head tilt the hallway creature had done. But here, wrapped in my skin, it looked almost human. Almost. It did not answer my question directly. It asked one of its own. Do you feel better now? Better. As if I had been sick. As if the old version of me was the problem and this smoother version was the cure. I looked at the monitors behind it. Rows of camera feeds. Every corridor. Every stairwell. Every emergency exit. All of them looked normal. Then I noticed something I had never noticed before. Tiny delays. A door that should have swung fully closed but remained open a sliver longer than physics would allow. A shadow under a stairwell that shifted slightly when nothing passed. A flicker in fluorescent light that did not affect the rest of the room. And in each flicker, a suggestion of long limbs folded into angles that did not match architecture. There never allowed myself to consider. The thing in my uniform stepped closer to me, but not into my space. It stopped at a distance that felt calculated to keep me calm. "You do not belong in the hallway anymore," it said softly. "You were always too loud in your own head." That sentence was not spoken to hurt me. It was spoken like explanation, like reassurance. It was trying to soothe the part of me that still resisted. I asked another question, because questions are a way of forcing the world to hold shape. Where is the real me? The thing blinked again, slow. Then it gestured gently toward the monitors. "You're looking at him." "No." I shook my head. The movement felt heavier than it should have, like my neck was resisting me. "Number. Where am I supposed to be?" The thing smiled again. "Here." That was when I heard it in the hallway outside the office. The dragging sound. Closer. Not hurried. Not stealthy. Just inevitable. I realized the building itself was functioning like the corridor. A rehearsal space, narrow hallways, controlled lighting, predictable routes, cameras everywhere. A place to study humans. A place to practice becoming them. The thing in my uniform turned its head toward the office door, listening. It looked almost pleased. "They are bringing the rest," it said. "The rest of what?" The thing's eyes focused on my face with unsettling intensity. It was not looking at me the way people look at people. It was looking at me like you look at an object you are about to repair. "You're missing parts," it said. "The parts you keep arguing with." And then, in a calmer tone, as if delivering a helpful reminder, it added, "You can stop fighting yourself soon." The dragging sound reached the office door. I stepped backward without thinking, my heel catching the edge of the doorway. The thing in my uniform did not move to stop me. It did not need to, because the door opened behind me, not by turning the handle, by bending. The frame distorted inward slightly, like the wood had become soft. The metal latch groaned. The gap widened without the door swinging. And through that widening space, something unfolded. It was the hallway creature again, but closer now, more detailed. Its limbs pressed against the walls like it needed them to exist. The hat brim scraped lightly against the ceiling tile, leaving a faint mark. It moved in slow segments, each motion like a hinge collapsing and reforming. As it entered the office, the fluorescent light above flickered. I saw the creature in frames again. Blink and it changed position. Blink and it was nearer. But now I understood the flicker was not electrical failure. It was the creature adjusting reality around its movement, making space. It stopped just inside the doorway, occupying the corner of the room without compressing. Its hands touched the wall gently, fingers splayed, as if feeling the texture of paint. Then it did something that chilled me far deeper than any growl or lunge could have. It imitated me, not the way it had in the hallway, not posture, not stance. It produced my breathing pattern, a soft inhale, a controlled exhale, the exact rhythm I use when I am trying to calm myself. And the thing in my uniform matched it. 2 breaths, 1 rhythm. They were syncing. I realized that was the mechanism, not violence. Alignment. Smooth the original until it stops creating friction. Make the new version fit perfectly. The creature in the corner tilted its head. The hat brim lifted slightly, and I saw beneath it not a face, a surface, like a mask stretched over something deeper. The skin was too matte, too uniform, as if the idea of pores had been painted on. And then the surface moved. Not muscle, not expression. A shift like fabric tightening. A mouth formed slowly, exactly where a mouth should be. It did not smile. It simply became the shape a mouth needs to speak. It spoke in my voice, not perfect yet, but close enough that my brain wanted to accept it. Come back to the corridor. The thing in my uniform took a half step toward me, still calm, still measured. It is easier there, it said. The hallway makes it simple, narrow, quiet. Only one way to stand, only one way to become. My mouth felt dry, my tongue heavy. I tried to swallow and the act felt delayed, like my body was waiting for approval. What happens if I refuse? The thing in my uniform looked genuinely puzzled, as if the concept did not compute naturally. Refuse what? Me, I said. What happens if I refuse being replaced? The thing's smile softened. It moved its hand slightly, palms visible, a universal gesture of peace. No one is replacing you, it said. We are finishing you. The hallway creature in the corner breathed in my rhythm again, and for a moment I felt my own thoughts loosen, like a knot being untied. Images flashed behind my eyes, not memories, not dreams, patterns, corridors, beige walls, blue carpets, narrow spaces, a sense of repeated practice over years. I realized then that the building had likely been chosen, not because of what it was, but because of what it was shaped like. A maze of human-scale corridors, a perfect place for something too long-limbed to learn how to fold itself into humanity. And I realized something worse. It was not just this building. Every office, every hospital, every apartment complex, every corridor in every city. The world was full of hallways. I backed toward the desk, Reaching instinctively for the radio, my fingers closed around it. The thing in my uniform did not react. It did not need to. Because when I looked down at the radio, the display showed something that made my stomach drop through the floor. There were no channels, just one number. 3B, camera 3B. The radio was not a radio anymore. It was a link, a call button, a way to invite the corridor. The hallway creature's mouth shape twitched as if it sensed my intention. The fluorescent light flickered again. The creature was closer now without having moved. I did the only thing I could think of that felt truly human. I caused noise. I slammed the radio into the side of the desk as hard as I could. Plastic cracked. Sparks jumped. The monitors flickered violently. For a second, the entire room went dark. In that darkness, I moved. Not carefully, not logically. I pushed past the chair, past the desk, toward the emergency exit that led into the stairwell. My shoulder hit the door. It gave. Cold air rushed in. I ran down the stairs, not trusting elevators, not trusting corridors. Above me, I heard the dragging sound, now faster but not in pursuit.